conversation on sustainability in business, which is a bit of a mouthful, but what it means is that we write articles, op-eds, interviews, and other online content about what sustainability means for business and how business can be used as a tool to positively advance the idea of sustainability. This is our monthly Stories in Beer event. It's an event we host here at the Hub. Has anyone not been to the Hub before? Cool, a few newcomers, all right. The Hub is, well, it's where you're sitting right now. It's essentially a collaborative workspace. It's also a kind of an incubator for startups, all of whom have some kind of social or environmental mission to them, just like us. Our office is in the back. We've been here for a few years. We think it's great. If you want to learn more about the Hub, you can talk to Carrie, our fantastic bartender over there, who can tell you all about it, and even hook you up with a free day to work there if you like, to learn a little bit about it. One other group that I wanted to give a shout out before we get started is Feel Good. Does one of you guys want to come and give us just the 30-second hello?
30-second hello. Can everyone get good cheese?
Yeah, looks like there's a couple left, so you got about 30 seconds to grab one if you want.
So we are not a catering company. We're a social entrepreneurship training.
Why don't you have the mic there?
We are not a catering company. We are a social entrepreneurship training program for college students. College students learn to run a social enterprise, which is a grilled cheese deli. All of the money that they raise is invested in the end of global poverty in support of the Sustainable Development Goals. So, hope you enjoyed the sandwich. Have a good evening.
All right. I hope you got a chance to try both times because they're both fantastic. As I was saying, this is our monthly Stories in Beer event. It's an event we convene every month to sit down and have beer and tell some stories about some interesting and relevant topic. We find that stories are one of the best ways to get to know a topic and to start asking and listening and learning and advance the whole idea of coming to solutions to some of our sustainability challenges. Tonight, we are convened to talk about a very hot topic that we have covered a lot in the last couple of years. It's this concept of the quote sharing economy. We'll debate a little bit about whether that's the right word these days to describe what we're talking about, but we'll get into that later. The reason we love the idea of the sharing economy, at least the way we define it, is we're talking about a type of business or community or organization which ultimately is about the sharing of resources, i.e. the idea of providing access to things without the consumption and ownership that may have negative environmental or social externalities. This is not exactly a new idea. This is something that's been common practice for hundreds of years. Folks in communities and among family and friends sharing resources and so on. Now it's become something that's sort of evolved and from that sort of basic community practice into an established business model. And has spawned all kinds of different terms: access economy, collaborative consumption, the peer-to-peer networks, et cetera, et cetera. Folks do get a little bit philosophical about it, talk about how this emerging sharing economy may have come about because we're sort of becoming a more altruistic society, and there are others who are a little bit more pragmatic about it, and then this is simply a logical response to resource scarcity and a technology that allows us to share resources far more efficiently. Which, regardless of which is true, it's an area that's spawned a whole lot of interesting businesses, organizations, and so on, 3 of whom are here this evening. I'm going to let you guys give us just a little bit of introduction to who you are. Just to run down the list, we have Emily Castor. She is with Zip, sorry. Molly Turner with Airbnb, and Rachel Barge with Yerdle. So if you guys could just give us the 30 seconds, who you are, where you're coming from, and then we'll get right into it. And just, by the way, guys, the format tonight, just so you know, I kind of keep my yakking to a minimum. We're going to go for maybe 15 minutes of some questions that I have, and then it's really up to you. So start thinking about interesting things that you want to ask, and we will spend most of the time talking amongst ourselves. And if for some reason you've got nothing to say, I'll keep talking, but that's unlikely. So, Emily, you want to get this started?
Sure. Hi, guys. My name is Emily Castor, and I'm the Director of Community Relations at Lyft. I started working with Lyft the first week that we launched, which was almost 2.5 years ago now. And all that time, we've expanded from one city right here in San Francisco to now 70 cities around the world, or actually the country, hopefully soon the world. And many of you may have experienced Lyft. Can you raise your hands really quickly if you've ever used Lyft? Awesome, thank you. So I don't need to tell you what it is. You're getting a ride from an everyday person, and the vision is really that we're able to use the empty seats in cars, and by building up a large community of people that do this, achieve the density that can really make real-time carpooling a reality, which we're starting to achieve with our Lyft Line product that I'll talk about probably later in this conversation. Molly.
Sorry, just throw it behind you.
Hi, I'm Molly. I run our civic partnerships program at Airbnb. Been there for just over 3 years. Have worked with cities all over the world on a whole bunch of things. Happy to talk about all of them.
Great, nice. It's a little easier on this side. Hi, I'm Rachel, and I lead growth at Yerdle. And I'm really not going to get the same volume, I think, of response that Emily got if you have used Yerdle, but has anyone used Yerdle? Oh, yeah. All right. We have about 200,000 people that have downloaded Yerdle and are using it to share durable goods. So anything from a blender to a camera to kids' clothes, books. And I came in a year ago, actually when our mobile app launched, as our sort of head of marketing and community. And I emphasize my role on growth at this point. And before that, I actually came from a seed investor that had invested in Yerdle. So I actually have invested in a number of sharing economy companies as well, and then just got the hankering and had to jump in and join one of my own portfolios. So that's where I come from.
Okay, great. So I sort of let the cat out of the bag when I started talking about all of these different terms that we're all using. And I don't even know if this question's become a cliche, asking you to define the sharing economy, but I have to ask it because we went ahead and we used that term. But I gave sort of a butchered definition of what I think it means, but I applied that it actually can mean a lot of things, and there's a lot of other terms. So I'm curious, your perspectives, what the heck that word actually means, and more importantly, what your respective enterprises are. Are they sharing economy companies? Are they something else? Are they some kind of combination? What's your definition and how do you fit in? We'll just go down the line and start with you.
Sure. So I get asked this question a lot, and I've definitely seen the evolution over the last 3 years of the way people describe what we're doing and what other people in peer-to-peer and sharing businesses are doing. There was a term collaborative consumption that was popularized by Rachel Botsman a few years ago. Today I had lunch with her and she told me she was done using that word and likes to call it the collaborative economy now, because people didn't like the term consumption. I have another friend, Denise Cheng, who likes to say the peer economy. And I still tend to say the sharing economy because I think it's just easier for people to say, but the way Rachel described it, I thought was actually pretty apt, which was to characterize sharing businesses as those that are really facilitating the use of underutilized assets. And so in our case, I think that we are progressing increasingly toward that model as we fill empty seats in cars like we're doing by carrying passenger rides with our Lyft Line product. There may be other platforms that are more like crowdfunding and things like that that don't fall as easily into that model and might prefer other terms.
It's a cliche to answer your question. That's okay. I don't think it matters what we call it. Is sustainability the right word that describes everything perfectly, or green? I mean, no, but it's how you define it. And I think our problem is we don't have a common definition of what the sharing economy means yet. And that's okay, we can get there. It's only been around in this form, in this latest form, tech-enabled form, for a couple years, so we have some time to define it. I think right now we're in the stage of the kind of how the Supreme Court views obscenity. You know it when you see it. So yeah, I'm not gonna try and define it. I'll just say it's okay. If it's not all sharing, it doesn't matter. We can call it sharing. We just have to define what it is.
Yeah, it's a complex topic, and I think for us at Yerdle, when we think about like
underutilized assets as the prompt, it's like, well then 100%, like we completely exist to allow people to get access to durable goods that are underutilized. 80% of the things we buy and have in our homes are used less than once per month. So we're like, that underutilization was the insight that caused us to create our business. And yeah, in terms of like access over ownership, which I think is something that you guys, your platforms really do. Like, you might not need to own a car in San Francisco if you use Lyft. You might not, need to, if buy a second home. You can Airbnb on the weekend somewhere and just try out different places. In terms of Yerdle, we're sort of access and ownership, I would say, because ultimately we're trying to facilitate you getting a secondhand good from someone and owning it, but avoiding having to buy new in the process. So yeah, I think, and I've also felt a little bit unsure about the rise of a lot of other tech companies in the last year that are all the sort of like on-demand delivery companies, the Instacarts and the Postmates, and it's like, well, they're utilizing people to deliver things quickly. Is that the sharing economy?
Can I add something on that note? I think the media has mischaracterized the sharing economy and basically assumes any disintermediated business where it uses tech to facilitate a real world transaction is the sharing economy, and that's just fundamentally wrong. If it's the same activity that occurred before with the exact same people, they just found clients, through the yellow pages or somewhere else. It's not really a transformative thing, not part of the sharing economy. And I think that's actually part of the problem is a lot of the press has kind of just made some assumptions that are not well informed.
I like what you're saying, and I was curious why we're even, feel this need to define something. And so I feel like there still is there's definitely something different, and I guess it's kind of two things, right? Because what you just said, Molly, I think is something that when I explain this to people who say, well, this isn't a new idea here, I'm like, yeah, you're actually right, but there is a difference when technology comes in and enables it, because the technology allows it to scale. For example, like you could give stuff away for free in your block, but the market is really small. When Yerdle can theoretically connect you with everybody on the planet, then suddenly that scalability, that technology-enabled scalability, suddenly makes a business model possible that wasn't there before. So there's definitely something a little bit different. So are we really, is it worth our time to attempt to put a label on it, or is there, how would you sort of, what word, I guess, do you use to kind of describe this slightly different thing?
So I'll say, I don't think it's worth a lot of time to try to worry about what label we should call it, because I'm not sure what practical utility that provides. But I think there's a reason why people do spend time doing that, and that's because of some of the controversy that surrounds this industry and the perception by some people that they think some ways of doing sharing are legitimate and that other ways of doing sharing aren't ideologically aligned with what they thought the sharing economy was. And so, I think that people would find examples on both of our platforms where they say, well, this person seems like a peer-to-peer provider, the other person is driving full time, so to me they seem like a taxi driver by any other name, which I certainly don't subscribe to. I mean, I think there are very valid reasons for participating in both of those driver use cases, but I think it's that kind of opinion that has led to a desire by some people to differentiate between a purist idea of sharing and what some of our companies are doing as we mature.
I would just add that, yeah, I think the two reasons why it's important. One, is it something new or different, or is it just the same stuff we were doing before? So that's, I think, why people want to know whether it's sharing or not. And the second is what Emily said. People associate some kind of social value or impact with this activity, and whether that's right or not, and everyone has a different perception of what that social value or impact should be. And so they like to see, is this activity having that impact or not, and upholding those values or not. And I think that's why it's important to people.
Totally forgot what I was going to say. It was building a little bit off that, and I think we're getting somewhere with this idea that this almost is just sort of a new economy that has a lot of different ways to participate in and interpret things. And I'm curious, but I will ask one more thing that is one of those things where people still kind of say, well, this is this and this is that, and that's labeled this and this is that, and that just to not to leave Yerdle out of the conversation, but for both of you guys, right? I go on vacation, I rent my place in Airbnb. It's like it's pretty hard to say that harms anybody. In fact, it's fantastic because it allows me to go out and spend less money on my vacations and we can stay in a cool place in San Francisco, But then here come the professional Airbnb, people that own 10 properties, and someone can make an argument that, I don't know, maybe that impacts availability of housing in San Francisco and all that jazz, all these arguments. And I guess, is there actually a difference? Is there a place that, to bring about 900 topics into this, in terms of what the law should say, and in terms of, what the different types of, is there actually a difference between those two types of activities? Should there be a difference? And if so, where do we start kind of trying to structure this? Same thing goes for sort of I'm a full-time Lyft driver, this is my job, and hey, I show up on Saturday and take a few bucks to drive around,
Yes, there's a difference, and we're the first people to acknowledge it, and that's exactly why yesterday San Francisco passed a law that distinguishes that, which I think is a good move for the city. I'm sure someone will ask me that later when we finish answering this question. And if you didn't read it, you need to get a copy of the Chronicle and stay informed about what's going on. Yes, there is a difference, and I think this is really central to the sharing economy, and particularly to sharing economy policy issues. Why sharing economy companies and more specifically communities have real policy challenges is because so many people are now participating in casual work. I wouldn't call it work, but I can't think of another word for it. It's not necessarily their full-time job. They don't necessarily have a license or a permit to do it. They don't have a lawyer or a tax accountant. This is something they're doing anywhere from a hobby to part-time. Some people do it full-time, right? And the reason it creates so many policy challenges is because most places don't have a regulatory infrastructure that addresses so many kind of casual entrepreneurs. They have a regulatory structure for professional businesses, people who do something full-time. And I think the trick with all of our activities is figuring out where do you draw the line between someone who's doing it in a quote-unquote kind of more sharing way, more casually, and someone who's doing it as a full-time business in a more traditional way. Taxi drivers have existed forever. Vacation rentals and professional property managers have existed forever. Thrift stores have existed forever. Where do you draw the line between that and the majority of our community members? And that's, I think, the real challenge.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting issue, and it probably plays out somewhat similarly on our platforms, although there might be a couple differences, because one thing I've seen that's very interesting from talking to a lot of different drivers over time is that even just with the same individual, their behavior changes over time, and the quantity of their participation as a driver changes. So there was this great example I experienced one time with a driver who drove me to work one morning, and I asked him, as I often do, about sort of why he was driving for Lyft and how often he'd been doing it and how long. And he told me that he'd only been doing it a couple weeks. He is a seasonal worker, and so his winter job is being a ski instructor, and his summer job is being an adventure guide in Costa Rica. Pretty nice life, like pretty fun stuff. And he has this 1 to 2 month gap when he isn't engaged in either of those pursuits. So he's a Lyft driver full-time, or he was trying being a Lyft driver full-time during that period. But this is very different from someone who would plan to be a career taxi driver. And that individual is not going to be willing to go through, for example, an onboarding process that takes 1 to 2 months, which is what it would take to become a licensed taxi driver, to go through the kinds of extensive bureaucratic processes and in-person screenings and long wait times and things like that it takes to get professionally licensed in that way, because he doesn't plan to do that after that limited period of time. And so I think that's a good example to kind of highlight these cases where it might not be helpful to think of full-time driving as the right place to draw the line. There are often people even who they'll drive a few hours a week as a supplemental form of income, and then certain times decide that they want to earn a lot more money because either maybe they lost their job, or maybe they just need to pay for something for their kid or save up for their wedding, and so they'll add it into a much greater degree. And I'm not sure that it should be something where the government steps in and draws a line and says, well, you can drive this many hours per week
because the character of their activity doesn't change how many hours per week they're doing it. So if they were safe to do it, 10 hours per week under an onboarding process, I'm pretty sure that they're safe to do it 40 hours per week under that onboarding process. One interesting thing that the city of Chicago has adopted, kind of unique in the nation among the different municipal frameworks that have been created for our industry, is they actually kind of look at a fleet-wide average. And they say, as long as your fleet-wide average of hours per week is below 20, then we'll categorize you as this kind of transportation network provider and allow you to have this more seamless technology-enabled onboarding process, and you don't have to do individual licensing for your drivers. We'll license you as a platform and make sure you're complying with certain kinds of requirements, but it makes it easy for regular people to still get involved. And so I think that's maybe a better way than trying to just draw really rigid lines that aren't going to make sense for people who are moving fluidly through different kinds of use.
Sorry, I think you guys, this is terrific. You guys just kind of hit the nail on the head about just describing how complex this is, because it's not just about radically disrupting business models, but this totally disrupts government and legal structures and everything in between. I mean, I'm going to let somebody else ask a question about that, because I can't even, wrap my head around it enough to ask them. But I want to ask one more question, and we're going to open it to you guys, and we'll get Yerdle back in the game here. This thing called sustainability, which I still use the term, but I'll define it sort of loosely as attempting to have a beneficial impact in 3 areas, not just your own ability to make a profit, but some kind of positive environmental impact and some kind of positive social impact. I'm curious if in general, you see this thing we're talking about, doesn't have a name anymore, this thing, as being productive to that idea, that triple bottom line idea, and or the role of your specific enterprise in doing that.
Yeah, I think, Yerdle very much, the inception of it was really grounded in sustainability. Our co-founders, one was the former head of sustainability for Walmart, which is probably a retailer that not many of us in this room shop at, but that is obviously a huge global force, and he really pioneered the first attempts to cause that supply chain to address its own sustainability issues and challenges. And our other co-founder was the youngest president of the Sierra Club when he was 24 years old, and has spent his whole career trying to help companies and especially big brands become more sustainable. And so ultimately, what our co-founders saw when they actually worked together on Walmart sustainability initiatives was that they were helping make individual products more sustainable. They were producing them in a more efficient way. They were reducing the energy inputs to make them. They were shaving off bits of plastic in the construction of products. But at the end of the day, they were still taking resources, making products in a factory, putting it on a shipping container, shipping it across the ocean, trucking it to a retail facility, having consumers drive to the retail facility and selling them these items, and they were selling them more and more and more items every year. Walmart has to sell between 3 and 7% more of everything every year as like a mandate, and that's actually what most retailers have to do. And as this was happening, all these items are filling up in our houses and they're not being utilized. And so the whole point was to say, if we could enable people to access all of the existing goods that are in homes, and for it to be as easy and seamless to get that thing as it is to one click, Amazon.com and have it on your door in 2 days, could we sort of address some of the huge resource and energy challenges that come from this very consumption-driven economy that we've built. And we have members in our community that are really deep green, and they look at stats like 95% of items on Yerdle are shipped between members, and they're like, what about the carbon footprint of the shipping? Like, what about that? And we still actually hold true that not making a brand new object and utilizing something that's already been created is actually the environmentally preferable way to consume something new. We love like the idea of people, everything from upcycling to like not purchasing in general to to shopping reused with Yerdle as a way to address sustainability. So that's sort of how we think about it. And I think in the sharing economy, like utilizing existing assets more efficiently is a huge key to sustainability. I used to work for the city of San Francisco in their Department of Sustainability, and like part of why we rank really highly among global cities is because we have this fixed 7x7 mile footprint, and we have to use that land and those resources and those fixed assets really efficiently, and our density is higher than other cities that are able to just sprawl everywhere. So I'm sure you can speak a lot more to the physical footprints of cities.
I was going to say, density is not high enough. We need to do better. Not every sharing economy company or community or activity is going to check all forms of sustainability. That's fine. The reason I work at Airbnb is because I've been for a long time very passionate about sustainable tourism development, and when I use the term sustainability there, I mean economic, social, and environmental sustainability. And I believe that Airbnb was doing exactly that in a way that really no other tourism activity could. So that's why I ended up working there in the first place. In fact, we've been studying Airbnb's impacts in each of those three kind of categories extensively. Social sustainability is a lot harder to measure, and we're grappling with that right now. But we think those are really, really important impacts for us, and that's part of the reason we exist. And so we continue to study it, make sure that the kinds of impacts we're having are those that we desire, and fine-tuning it.
Similar to Rachel, the founding story of our company, which actually began with a different name, Zimride, was really about filling the empty seats in cars to achieve an environmental impact. So our founder, John, was taking a class at the Cornell Hotel School where he was studying undergrad, and they were talking about occupancy rates. And in hotel school, it's really important to think about occupancy because you want your hotel to be successful, and this is sort of a problem you guys are actually directly solving, right? Not having this underutilized capacity for tourism, but in transportation, we actually only have 20% occupancy of the personal cars on the road. So 80% of seats in personal cars are just empty. And the reason for that is that there hasn't really been an efficient, easy way to match people up who are going along the same routes, right? There are a variety of reasons for that, but the primary, I would say, why carpooling hasn't been adopted more widely on a mainstream basis is that it's just much more convenient to get in your car and drive out the door, rather than having to go find someone else who might be going the same place you are at the exact same time that you are. And so the idea of Lyft is to try to get enough people participating that it's possible to make those matches in real time and to actually achieve the mobility of a growing population without having to proportionally increase the number of cars on the road, and thereby to reduce emissions, to reduce vehicle miles traveled, to try to reduce traffic congestion and parking congestion in our cities. But I will say that in the initial phase of Lyft, we had to face a lot of skepticism about whether what we were doing was actually going to achieve those goals. Because the way Lyft started out didn't obviously have a tie to what people viewed as carpooling. Because we have a driver who's out there who's not going somewhere for their own reasons. We're controlling one side of the equation and making sure that there will be rides available for people right from the start, by having just an everyday person go out and spend their time driving people around. And so people said, well, does this really have a positive environmental impact? And so from that moment, we had to tell a story about how this was going to evolve into something quite different once we achieved a high level of participation. But it was actually really hard to tell that story, and it was hard to get people to believe us. It's recently gotten quite a bit easier because, as I mentioned earlier, we introduced the next evolution of our product, which we call Lyft Line, which now is possible because we have so many people participating. It wouldn't have been possible on day one because it relies on having such a high density of passengers that there's actually a significant probability that we could find two people who are starting out from the same place and going along the same route as each other within a very short interval of time. But we now do have that high probability because so many people are using Lyft. And so we actually will group those multiple passenger groups together and have the driver stop and pick up one person and then pick up another person and drop off one and drop off the other, and we're really achieving higher occupancy vehicle use. I think that the next step is where the driver is going somewhere for their own purposes, who's that commuter or driving somewhere, and to get them to be able to pick up someone along the way. But again, you need density for that. We have a much larger number of passengers than we do drivers, so there would be a low likelihood of that person matching with where a driver was going. But if we could get everyone to be a driver, running Lyft on their phones like they do Google Maps, then there'd be a much higher likelihood of those, and there could be really dramatic reductions in vehicle miles traveled.
Love it. I got about 83 more questions, but it's your turn. You're first, and then we'll just go down the line. So go ahead.
So that being said,
And speak good and loud so that we were supposed to have a microphone, but it didn't work out.
I love Lyft Line. I signed up for Zimride years ago, and I casual carpool. I'm totally into it. Is there any prospect of not requiring a phone to participate in Lyft or Lyft line where you would be opening up to people who don't have a smartphone?
Well, we are a software product, and it's not the first time I've been asked that. I do recognize a digital divide that exists with very low-income populations. Thankfully, the rate of smartphone adoption as phone costs have gone down with Android phones has greatly increased to the degree that, greatly surpassed even what wired infrastructure was ever able to achieve. So I'm hopeful that that's going to become a diminishing problem, and that there may be ways to help support the access of low-income individuals to smartphones. It would be possible to create telephone-type interfaces, but I don't know that that's going to be a problem that continues to exist for very long.
I wanted to ask you, do you have any statistics about the amount of people who declare their revenues versus people who kind of keep themselves under the radar? Because in Europe, for instance, I've used a few times Airbnb, and I've always asked the tenants whether they could do it. Most of the time in London, for instance, they couldn't do it because they had a contract which prevented them from subletting their apartment, and they didn't tell that to the landlord, and they didn't then tell that to the taxman. So actually, it was like a dark economy under the radar, as long as you can last.
It's hard to do though, right? Because you guys both put out 1099 people, yeah?
In the US, we 1099 everybody who's made above a certain threshold. If you haven't, I don't forget what the threshold is, but it's actually quite high. If you haven't made more than that, then you don't have to pay income tax. And then on top of that, there are other taxes, and that's not part of the 1099 process. And in other countries and jurisdictions, there are all different kinds of laws. Actually, in most European countries, they have a pretty high threshold for how much you have to make annually to pay income tax, and most of our hosts don't make that much, so they don't have to. But it differs from place to place and host to host, and it's hard for us to know who's paying what. Maybe they're using Airbnb and 9 Flats or some other website, so it's hard for us to know exactly how much they've earned by renting your home. But we send reminders to people and have links to the tax pages in various jurisdictions and stuff. So we try to educate people, but we can't track it.
Yeah. Okay.
I think all your companies are kind of inherently sustainable, or whatever word you want to use. I'm really interested about the consumer education piece, and I'm curious about whether that's something you think about in terms of maybe not people in this room, but kind of telling the story of the impact that reducing consumption has socially and environmentally. Is that something you're thinking about, and how are you doing it? So,
Is sustainability a story worth telling for you guys?
I don't know about that, but that's a really interesting question, especially in our space. There's actually a number of nonprofits and organizations that are dedicated to like an anti-consumption kind of message, whether it's Annie Leonard's Story of Stuff or Center for the American Dream, or even all the big environmental NGOs will have sort of an anti-consumption platform. And I think what their struggle is that is engaging people through just a message actually facilitating behavior change on the other end. And how would you even measure that if the medium of your outreach is purely text and images and social media and emails and things like that? And what I've been kind of heartened by at Yerdle is seeing some cases where we can actually verifiably start to see behavior change from some of our members. And we basically, something cool that we do is we break all of our users into this sort of pyramid, our Yerdle members, and at the very top we have like this hyperactive group of folks that are just like obsessed with Yerdling, and they will give away like 100 things a week and ship out 100 packages a week. And they will also often receive like 100 packages a week, because part of what they're doing, whenever you give something away on Yerdle, you earn this virtual currency called Yerdle credits. It's these points that you can use to then go get other people's things. So basically, the more you give, the more you can get. And we realized these people were attracted to our site because they realized they could give, and earn all these points and then go get, which is not necessarily like the overarching behavior we were trying to create, but it's like, well, this is how these people want to use it, and they're crazy active, and that's awesome. And they actually represent like 70% of the transactions on our platform comes from like a less than 1% number of our users. But we actually started to slice the data, and we looked at over time, they were initially giving to get, and their give and get ratio was similar, but then their get ratio started to decrease and their give ratio was increasing, and actually a lot of them end up flipping, and they just get kind of like addicted to the experience and the behavior of like decluttering their home, delighting someone new with something that they needed or wanted, and like the kind of social experience that they have. And we actually sort of modeled ourselves off of Lyft in the way we engage these folks by having a private Facebook group for them, which Lyft has for their drivers. And so we actually see them dialoguing constantly on Facebook. Like my Facebook is just all Yerdle people talking about Yerdle. It's crazy. And so it's fun to see people get really engaged in that behavior. And anecdotes have come back to us where they say, you know, I used to shop at Target 7 days a week. Like I had to go to Target every day and buy something new. It was like a compulsion. And I haven't been to Target in 3 months since I started using Yerdle. And like those kinds of things make me so happy. Because, you know, we all need stimulation. We all need to feel good and connected and like feel like we have friends and, you know, be excited about life. And like there are some people who were, you know, that was the way that they got excited, and this is a way for them to like have equal, if not more, levels of excitement with just like a much decreased impact on the environment. So we get excited about that.
Right there.
Hi, my name is Adam Brous. I'm started a sharing economy company called Co-Ride. Actually, it's like Zimride, but just Zimride's not owned by Lyft anymore. We're crushing them. So. But the question is, I've like in the sharing economy, I found like so many cool things, and I thought maybe you guys had like cool sharing economy apps or like sharing economy interactions or experiences. Maybe even like my favorite is public libraries. It's one of the best sharing economy things I've ever seen. I just wondered if you guys had kind of really cool niche sharing economy things you've seen.
Just your favorite examples of what we're calling sharing economy.
This is a little bit different, and it might fall into like an area where we would argue about whether it's the sharing economy, but I've been using Latote and Rocksbox, which are basically, they're like Netflix for clothes and jewelry, and I feel so much less wasteful because, so I basically can pay $50 a month to Latote, and they send me a box that has 3 pieces of clothing and 2 pieces of jewelry in it, and it's basically just like replaced my need for work clothes. 3 days a week, I work at a startup, I can get away with like looking pretty scummy like 2 days a week, and then 3 days a week, I can just wear the tote stuff, and then I send it back. They keep it, they send me more stuff, they do the dry cleaning, which is great because I'm horrible at getting my dry cleaning done. And so I get constant variety without having to accumulate possessions, which I think is really cool. And same thing for the jewelry from Rocksbox, which this actually is. I feel like I'm in an infomercial for but yeah.
You're gonna think that this is all part of my like Airbnb communications plan, but it's actually not. I've never said this. And it's also top of mind. My favorite experience is I did AFS, which is like Rotary, 14 years ago, and lived with a family in Sicily. I didn't speak a word of Italian or Sicilian. I didn't know what the hell I was doing. And that experience completely changed my life. Today I'm fluent in Italian. I've lived in Italy collectively for 6 years. And last week I just went back for my host sister's wedding. And in fact, I had booked an Airbnb in the town, and the groom picked me up at the airport and refused to take me there. And they insisted that I actually sleep in bed with the bride the night before her wedding. So that was a sharing economy experience that literally changed my life.
That is so awesome. Yeah, I have ones for Lyft and Airbnb. I guess my favorite one I always ask my Lyft drivers what they do as well, and I was really moved by a guy who was probably in his 60s, Chinese man, and he was saying how he had spent like the last 20 years driving shuttles at SFO, and that he had to work 12 hours a day from like 5 a.m. to 5 p.m. And he did it actually like 7 days a week, like he basically never saw his family. And then his kids went to the UCs and like got PhDs and are like molecular biology, scientists at Genentech, and bought him a car so that he could be a Lyft driver, so that he could have a flexible schedule and like see their mom and see them more. So that got me really excited, because I think that shows the transformative power that flexible work can really give people.
And
Talking on it.
no, that's fine. And then I guess with Yerdle, like 2 of our members met in our Facebook group, moved across the country together, got matching tattoos, got like spontaneous married in Central Park, and are like crazy in love in New York. So they grace the Facebook page a lot, and their little love story makes us all very happy.
Good stuff. Right over here.
I have a question for Airbnb. Have you thought, thank you guys. Have you thought about how you interfere with existing sharing communities? For example, familiar with couchsurfing. Yeah. Before Airbnb, it was very easy, at least in Europe, to go to a big city like London and live for free, which I appreciate a lot since I'm a student. I don't have a lot of money. But after Airbnb sort of entered Europe, they sort of crowded out all the good karma and goodwill in couchsurfing, and people start to save a lot of money for sharing their home instead. And I really appreciate Airbnb because it is a very good idea, but as a student with not that much money, I was quite annoyed that a quite well-functioning community was sort of not ruined, but at least it was not that well-functioning afterwards.
Sure. I actually don't know that much about how Couchsurfing is doing, but as far as I know, it still exists. I know they've had some leadership changes and business changes, and are kind of figuring out what's next. So I don't know what kind of impact we've had on them or what kind of impact other dynamics have had on them. I would say that my parents would never in a million years use Couchsurfing. They won't even stay in my apartment when they come visit me. They've used Airbnb many times and are totally addicted to it. And so just like with hotels, I think, we can all meet different kinds of demands and in different ways. And I hope that we can all coexist. I assume that we can coexist because Couchsurfing still exists. But, the market will change and the demands will change. And honestly, people throughout their lives will change. I probably, if I had known about Couchsurfing, 10 years ago, probably would have used it all the time. Today, probably not. I'd rather pay some money and have a little bit more of the amenities that I'm looking for when I travel. So I think, I hope we can all coexist, but I don't know.
Who's next? You in front, and then you, and then over there.
My question is, I think we all agree that trust between peers is key to the sharing economy. What are you, I guess this is mostly directed toward Airbnb and Lyft. What are your long-term thoughts in terms of ensuring safety and obviously trust, but mostly in terms of ensuring safety between, not just the customers and passengers, but as well as the drivers and the homeowners?
Yeah, this has always been something that I think our company has been very aware that we have to give people confidence about, because we're asking them to do something that traditionally has been seen as kind of crazy. Like literally people's parents tell them don't get in a car with a stranger, right, from a very young age. So we knew we had to break a well-integrated social more. And the way that we've done that includes giving people faith that we've done a very thorough job of vetting drivers. So I don't know how much people are aware of this, but we do criminal background checks. We do driving record checks. We do an in-person vehicle inspection and ride along with any new driver and interview them on the telephone. And then we have a mutual rating system, which exists across most of these kinds of platforms to help provide behavioral accountability so that we can easily detect when someone's had a bad experience, if there's someone that's either quantitatively receiving lower average feedback than everyone else and falling below those standards that we have for our platform, or if there are individual incidents where we receive feedback that someone has had a particularly unacceptable experience, and we can quickly act. So we have entire teams constructed around this, both to vet people up front and also make sure there's ongoing accountability. And those are things that the regulations around our industry are canonizing in law in many places.
We're doing, all the same kind of stuff, but I would say really it's a perception issue. And I just learned an amazing statistic. that I think really drives home this point. So Airbnb has the $1 million host guarantee. If someone who's staying in your house causes damage or theft or something, we'll cover it up to $1 million. The chances of us having to use our host guarantee are like, you're more likely to get struck by lightning than to use our host guarantee. It's really a perception issue.
Another thing that I always think is kind of interesting, because from the passenger side, when you step into a taxi, no one knows that you're there. And so it's always seemed strange to me that people think that it's scarier to get in a Lyft. And I'm not sure people still do think it's scarier, actually. I think there's been a lot of traction made on this point, and a lot of women feel comfortable using ride sharing because they know it's tracked. But basically, on our platform, everyone knows who your driver is, who the passenger is, who you're with, and what geolocation you were at, and exactly who those people were at any given point in time that they're on the platform. So there's tremendous accountability compared to traditional forms of transportation, where if you street hail a vehicle and get in, no one could ever track that that was the one that you got into if somehow you disappeared off the face of the earth.
Yeah, like my friend recently got in a cab like on a Saturday night, and like the cab driver's girlfriend was in the front, which was like a little weird, but then they started having like a domestic dispute in the cab, and then like she got out, and then like he got out, and the car was still like moving, and they started like having a fight, and it was like really crazy. And I feel like cumulatively, like probably the cab drivers I've had in my life versus like Lyft drivers, it's like the sketchy department is fuller over there than with Lyft. And I think it is funny how the introduction of a new service caused people to think about it, maybe where they hadn't even really been thinking about safety in cabs before, because it was so common. But yeah, we definitely think about trust and safety at Yerdle as well. You're shipping things to each other. Thankfully, eBay came along and diffused the whole like, people can't ship things to each other, they'll put a bomb in the package. Like that was like a lot of the media firestorming us when eBay was first getting bigger. So generally that's not a concern, but we do take fraud really seriously because we have a virtual currency, and like the currency is valuable, and you can get really awesome things like Beats by Dre headphones and like exciting things on Yerdle with it. And so we've had to develop a fraud detection system sort of over time. And in fact, our super users ended up getting like really obsessed with cheater hunting on Yerdle. And so we had to make like a different Facebook group for them to just do the cheater hunting and like post the screenshots like constantly of people that they suspect to be cheating and trading credits between each other illegally. So they take our fraud guarantee very seriously.
Well, I want to sneak a question in because I absolutely love where you guys are going with this conversation. We do live in a weirdly paranoid society. I mean, the United States in particular, but it's out there, right? Do you think that everything that we're talking about in each of your companies and this whole idea of Yerdle is actually, I don't know how you measure this. Maybe it's a wishy-washy question that just winds up being an opinion. But do you think that this kind of activity will actually sort of start to reduce that kind of paranoia, to actually bring our relationships back to that? It's not that it was ever ideal, but to actually improve human connectivity. I mean, really, do you?
I hope so. I think it can make a dent. I think that like paranoia reduction in America is going to be really difficult as long as Fox News is in business.
What do they say about Yerdle? Should you get up?
I wish they would start talking about Yerdle, please. So if you're on Fox right now, talk about Yerdle. It's very scary. There might be Ebola on Yerdle. Not. Just when you're a really small startup, you're like always looking for any chance to get noticed. But no, I mean, I think I'll just back this one up. I think America has a very weird paranoid culture where people buy a lot of guns to like store in their house in case someone comes to their door and they want to like be able to use them. And so I don't know if like the sharing economy is going to address that kind of like the paranoia, but I think it will help build relationships in a world that's increasingly digitized, right? Because it's like, I was here earlier with these ladies over here and looking out, and it's like the majority of people who got to the event early were sitting down in their chairs like this, locked in their screen until Nick said it was time to get it started. And I think that getting in a car with another human being and talking to them on your way to work kind of forces you to get out of that kind of mode. Increasingly more with Lyft because they built an intentional culture around it compared to like Uber, where I think it's more like the drivers are trained not to speak to unless spoken to, which is a little weird. And same thing with Airbnb, you know, like you go to a hotel, you check in, and it's just like you are in your own little zone. And with Airbnb, you're actually in many cases meeting someone local and connecting with them. So I have a lot of hope that we can facilitate not reduction of paranoia, but post-digital relationships.
I've actually just noticed it myself in my own behavior recently. I no longer read Airbnb host reviews before booking. I just book. I look at the pictures, I care about that, but I don't even read the reviews
Just
anymore.
a little bit, or just?
I don't,
It's
literally, I do
just-
not scroll down to the reviews.
I'm super enthusiastic about this idea. I think it's actually really transformative. I mean, just my own personal experience has led me to believe that I'm actually changing the way that I interact with a lot of different strangers in my life because of what Lyft has taught me about openness to talking to people around me. And I think that there's been this phenomenon where, you know, we all started like in sort of agrarian society, like living in little villages where we knew everyone, and we did depend on each other and talk to each other and felt like we had kind of a high level of social capital. And with urbanization, we're all packed in right next to each other, but we're not necessarily talking to each other. There's a lack of trust, a lack of a sense of accountability that made us not feel comfortable engaging in those kinds of relationships or material transactions with people around us. And I think because of the trust and safety infrastructure that lies over these marketplaces, it makes people feel freer to do that. And then once they step in a car, you know, and sit there for 15 minutes across town, and they're encouraged to relate to that person as a person, not as just a service provider, it creates a different opening for people to have a conversation. And personally, I feel like it's made me just be interested in other people and feel empowered to talk to them, ask them about their lives. And then, you know, when I see other people around, whether it's a checker at a grocery store or it's you know, someone I just happened to encounter sitting next to me on the subway or something like that, I feel like less inhibited about having that conversation. So I don't know if I'm just like a weird outlier, I totally could be, but I know that there are some really smart sociologists and other researchers. I think I've heard from like 3 different sets of academics recently who are specifically on this question, who are conducting experiments now. Who they wanted to survey our users and talk about, try to discover whether by participating and sharing behavior on these platforms, they're actually becoming more trusting, you know, less inhibited towards strangers in other parts of their lives. So maybe with those studies coming out in the next couple of years, we'll start to have some answers about how it actually affects people.
I'm dying to see those studies. I promised you were next, and then you, and then we do have to go into a quick answer mode. So start with you.
Sure. Just going back to the whole idea of these systems being kind of self-rating and like regulating itself that way, what do you think that brings in the role of government regulation? Is it sort of, does it undermine it, or is it just spotting an inefficiency of the government to keep up with this new economy?
Lyft has never denied that the government has authority to regulate us. I think, if anything, our greatest challenge has been that categories don't exist that fit us. And so we have to ask government to create new categories for us, which we've done in many places, including California. So that I'm fine with. The self-regulation, I think, around like the rating system and things like that, it's like signaling. It doesn't mean there's not real regulation as well. Real regulation establishes like ground rules and standards for people to participate. Ratings, you know, give you individual feedback that help you know when someone is sort of running afoul of those standards.
Okay, I have a question about mobilization of your networks. So I was just thinking about how Airbnb managed to step in Brazil during the World Cup when there weren't enough hotels. So rather than building hotels that there would not be demand for after a major international sporting event, we were all able to use homes that already existed and hosts that already existed. And I'm wondering, what is the future of mobilizing this network of human capital that you've created? Because it seems like there's amazing untapped potential. So where's it going, and what could you do with that in the future?
Good question. That's what I spend most of my time thinking about these days. That's what we're working with a lot of cities around the world on, is how can you make use of our existing business model and community to achieve some of your goals. And in fact, I worked on the World Cup project with the Brazilian government. A week before the event, we got a call from the National Minister of Tourism saying, we have an emergency. The host city of Cuiabá does not have enough hotel rooms. We couldn't build enough. Can you please help us? We sent a team down there. Within a week, we doubled the number of rooms in the city. That not only helped host the event, but also helped local residents actually benefit from the event, not just economically, but socially, right? We're now, talking with the Olympics. We've helped host big events like that all over the world. So that's only the beginning. Similarly, our disaster relief program has really, really inspired the emergency response community. They have a lot of problems finding short-term emergency shelter and medium-term kind of transitional shelter for people who are displaced after a disaster. Well, it turns out the community is often the best resource, but a lot of these organizations have a lot of difficulty managing that resource, and also, frankly, their kind of liability systems aren't set up for it. We are. And so we make great partners for them. And so we're working with cities and civic organizations around the world on exactly that. How can we, as you put it, mobilize or kind of repurpose our business model and our community and our resources to help achieve some of these goals that maybe we never thought we could achieve, but together we can.
Tex, do you have a question?
Yeah. My name is Tex, and I'm writing for Care2.com, and I'm also very interested in what all y'all are doing. About 2 days away from listing Airbnb for the first time. My question is, my background is socially responsible business. A lot of my friends, my peers, they're triple bottom line people. And in the case of both Lyft and Airbnb, I can't imagine what they have to say about Yerdle. It just sounds so awful. But I've had pushback from my own peer group that I'm about to list on Airbnb. I've had pushback from friends with other friends using Lyft because of cab drivers, and especially with them possibly going union. So it's very interesting to be in this position where I'm such a firm believer in what all three of your companies do, but of course, you're making money, so there's going to be people that cry about that in itself. I guess what my question is what is somebody like me who's lived and breathed people Planet Profit for at least 12 years, and most of the people that I work around and live around and hang out with, they have problems with me using your service, and it's a very weird situation. So I would love to hear just your take on how you grapple with that, and how you recommend folks like I grapple with that. That's my question.
Well, I'm not sure exactly what kind of problems your friends are citing. I'm sure
housing shortage.
People can come up with all kinds of problems, but I would say my advice to you would be look at yourself, and if you have values, people, places, profit, the way you use our services as a provider or as a consumer, if you don't find that it aligns with your values, then don't use it. But if you find that it does align with your values, which I have found, and trust me, I would not be at Airbnb if I didn't find that anymore, then stop using it. So I think it's all about your personal experience, and frankly, we supplement that by putting out a lot of studies that demonstrate the kinds of impacts we have to back up a lot of our arguments with data. I would also warn that anecdote plus anecdote does not equal truth or reality. So I'd say, as long as you feel comfortable with your own personal experiences, then keep doing it.
And I'll jump in there and I'll add, San Francisco loves to be a little bit reactionary about things. And I think at the end of the day, you gotta tell people this, there's a little bit of a gray area here, right? You could use a platform like Lyft or Airbnb for, something that's clearly beneficial to, a triple bottom line philosophy, such as I'm renting my place out because I'm on vacation and I go through a whole 9 yards of welcoming somebody to the city and giving people the opportunity to stay here versus, I own some building and I rent it out on Airbnb, and there may be some kind of argument to be made for whether that person is using Airbnb for a purpose that may or may not align with my values. So, it's not just like black or white. I mean,
Yeah, and I would add to that by saying, like, the context is really important. In San Francisco, we have a housing shortage, and that's exactly why the city passed a law that clarified that it's not okay to rent out your apartment professionally short-term. In a city like Detroit, where there is too much vacant housing, in fact, they would love a lot of people to rent out housing professionally short-term. So it really depends on the context, and I think that's why I say, like, you have to know what your values are and be honest with yourself about what you're doing and what you're experiencing, and it's your personal decision.
I think the context in this case, you're right, it is about context. So it might be worth mentioning. Here's a prime example. A very green person who's upset because she's a long-term artist, long-term resident, born and raised here, can't afford to live here. She's upset I'm posting my extra room on Airbnb.
Well, she needs to know there's a lot more factors than just Airbnb at play.
So I'm removing that real estate from the rental market. That's a very...
I would tell her to talk to a housing economist. We have.
Yes, you were talking about the fact that your co-founder used to work and study in the accommodation industry and talking about occupancy rate. I would ask the people of Airbnb, would you help professional hotels and bed and breakfast to use the underused capacity that they have, because they don't build new stuff, so it's very sustainable. It's all, the hotel is there in the street. So would it fit with your values? Would you have an existing hotel to fill the rooms in the same way that we fill the space in the hotel?
Yes, we do have values about using underutilized space. However, we also have other values about human connections, providing personal, authentic, meaningful experiences, and an empty room at the Marriott isn't providing that to people. And so, no, not right now.
Okay, and we are getting close to time, so we'll go to hyper quick time. And Molly, you have to run. Let's give Molly a run. She told us earlier she had to run, so thank you. And if you guys are cool hanging for a few more minutes, we'll go boom, 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 and then we're gonna wrap it because we don't want to take up too much time. But we had a question in front, and then we'll go right in the back, and then there was someone over here. I thought, now's your chance. Okay, 1, 2, 3, but make them quick.
Can you speak up a little bit? Yeah, I have.
I'll repeat it. Go ahead.
So, like, how do you, I think the business models you are having is incredible and amazing. How do you make it more mainstream? Meaning, like, helping the traditional business to understand and implement more your business models into their actual daily business practice and their existing business models to make it more impactful than just what you are doing.
So evolving mainstream businesses to start thinking along these lines, is that something you guys are working on, or even to answer it generically, what would you do if you were a mainstream business, so to speak, if that means anything?
Yeah, well, I think you're talking about bringing these services mainstream, bringing them to every American. And I think in your case, you guys are obviously constrained to the cities that you operate in, and hopefully you'll continue expanding. But right now, you're geographically in the 70 cities you operate in, whereas Yerdle is in every state in the U.S. And I think it reminded me of like our initial question, which is like, is it the sharing economy? Is it not the sharing economy? It's like, that does not matter when you are trying to reach a mainstream consumer. Like, if you're just in middle America and you're like, hey, do you want to get a $130 thing for $5? There's a place you can do that. It's called Yerdle. Or like, do you want to join the sharing economy? Let me explain what that is in 10 minutes. And like, if you're still paying attention, you might learn that you could save a crap load of money by shopping on the site versus continuing to buy new. So for us, like, we actually did like a language review recently, and like, sharing is actually a word that we're really not trying to overutilize in our like external messaging, just because it's kind of confusing. It's not it's not a mainstream word when you think about what the action we're trying to facilitate, which is like, this is a place where you can get things. And once you come here and you learn it's a great place to get things, you'll also be compelled to want to give things as well.
Love it. Right in the back real quick.
Is eBay part of the sharing economy?
That's a great question. And what is so interesting about eBay is how they've really driven their business to basically wanting to compete essentially with Amazon. Like everything they've done in the last few years is around brand new brands and like basically operating as a giant sort of branded retailer instead of a peer-to-peer marketplace for exchanging goods. So I would argue that they were actually a very early pioneer in the sharing economy. It's been a vision that their company hasn't really wanted to stick to.
If eBay had an option for free, well, you'd be in trouble, but that could be along those lines, right? All right, last question, real fast.
So the disruptive economy seems to be very innovative and it seems to be solving some problems here. Do you guys see any opportunity for this same disruptive economy to be solving some of the bottom tier issues like access to clean water or stuff like that?
You see, yeah, disruptive economy, AKA sharing economy, et cetera, bottom of the pyramid solutions.
Yeah, just one, I keep giving anecdotes about Lyft, but like the funniest thing about that, when I first used my Lyft line and another person was in the ride with me, I was just transported back to Cameroon, West Africa, where I'd been a year before, in which like the entire taxi fleet is informal, it's people's in their own cars, and it's all shared. And so you stand on the street corner and like you shout where you're going repeatedly out into the street in French, if you can speak French, which I can't, so my sister-in-law. And the taxi drivers come by, and if they hear that you're going to a place that's like roughly on the way with they're going, they let you in, and they generally cram like 6 people into the back seat. So there's like layers of kids like on top of their mom, and they're like pressed up against you, and you just get like these awesome sweat marks all over yourself as you like make your way to where you're going. And I was like, dude, these cities have been doing this for much longer than we've been doing it here in San Francisco. It's ubiquitous, it's efficient, it's super cheap. It's like 35 cents a ride usually in like Douala or Yaoundé. And so in fact, we've had to work really hard to make really fancy software to sort of make this ubiquitous behavior here, but it's actually already occurring in a lot of other places. And in our case, hand-me-downs, giving away things you no longer need, making them useful to the community, and not letting things go to waste, not throwing perfectly useful things into the landfill. I mean, that's a behavior that the majority of the world does because they value their durable goods and their resources, and we just haven't in a world where we've been over-consuming. So, the hope is like our software can meet the existing behavior and kind of make it work for everybody.
Yeah, this is something I think about a lot, and I don't just think about it in the developing world context, but I'm asked a lot about what can this do to help address access and equity issues in America. Because there really has been an inequitable access to transportation in all of our cities. There are parts of town where it's hard to get a ride. There are people in every part of town who've historically had a hard time getting rides that I hear, and that includes, it includes African-American people, it includes blind people, it includes, a lot of different reasons why people have historically struggled to get access to transportation. Some of them structural, some of them discriminatory, some of them just because cities can't cost effectively extend fixed route transportation infrastructure into diffusely populated areas. It's not cost effective for them to run a train line down to Lake Merced. And so by having a kind of pop-up infrastructure that arises to meet transportation needs wherever it's needed, and by putting that in the hands of community members, of everyday people to be drivers, to actually provide transportation services to their own areas of town, we can help solve those inequities while providing economic opportunity to the very people who live in those neighborhoods.
Thank you, guys. So we will hang out for a little bit longer to keep the conversation rolling. There's plenty of beer left, so no need to run out the door, but I do want to give a special thanks to both of you for joining us, as well as Molly, who unfortunately had to leave. So a little round of applause for you. It was an absolutely terrific conversation tonight. We are going to be continuing to cover the sharing economy, or maybe we'll come up with a better name, on triplepundit.com in the future, so please follow along and check out the site. We hope to be announcing a new series on this topic in the near future. We will be back here next month. A very exciting topic. We're going to be talking about sports and sustainability. Obviously, no one cares about sports because there was a certain baseball game going on tonight. I'm glad that you guys made it. But we've got folks, it's going to be really interesting. We've got folks coming from the Super Bowl committee, not this coming Super Bowl, but the next one, which is going to be at Levi Stadium in Santa Clara. And we're going to be talking all about that and some of the surprisingly excellent things that they're doing to make sustainability part of the Super Bowl. So check out triplepundit.com. There'll be an invite up on the site where you can RSVP. And like I said, we'll hang out for a little while longer. And thanks a million for coming.